Welcome to the Tarot Tapestry, a weaving of self-discovery, where three tarot mavens put their heads and hearts together to offer their wisdom and insights about the tarot. We hope that you find this helpful in your personal journey to self-discovery and growth.
Join us as we explore ways to use tarot for self-reflection and self-correction.
Together, we'll discover new ways to use tarot to weave threads of understanding into the tapestry of your life.
Hi, I'm Angie.
I'm Kate.
And I'm Linda, and this is the Tarot Tapestry with the Tarot Trio.
So what are we doing? We're doing the Empress.
We're doing the Empress.
Yes, we are.
And I kept, when I was writing about it today, I kept writing High Priestess. Like last week when we talked about the High Priestess, and I kept calling the Empress the High Priestess. It was very, very irritating. I had like kind of the same experience as with the High Priestess, in that I didn't really have a whole lot to say about the Empress. Like my brain was all crazy and wonderful, excited about how it relates to the other three cards, but about that there wasn't really a whole lot. So I, of course, then I do my practice, and it helped a little, and I wrote some things down, and then 15 minutes before we meet, I'm like, aha, I know what I want to do now.
I'm inspired. Inspiration is hit.
Finally. But I think everybody has, or a lot of tarot readers have, strong feelings about the Empress one way or the other. Like the classical imagery shows her as a pregnant woman, in a way sort of perfect in my estimation, because it is sort of, this is the culmination of what the Magician and the High Priestess made happen, and now it's at a point where it's like taken root, and probably other people know about it, or whatever it is that you're trying to build or create, you've enlisted the help of others. Like if you think of the Three of Pentacles in the Rider-Waite-Smith, the contracts have been signed and the deposits are non-refundable. So it's kind of like the point in whatever process where you can turn back, or something can go wrong, so it doesn't happen. It's not all on you all the time. Like I said, this is usually when you've brought other people in. So, other people can at times be disappointing, or things out of our control can happen. But it's kind of at that point where you've started and you're far enough down the road that either you've made a horrible mistake or that you are going to go ahead with it, or sometimes you both at the same time, depending on what it is. Like, and I think with this card, I was inspired to make a spread about how to kind of release whatever's going to end or change or become smaller, so whatever it is you're building can have the room to grow and to come and to ripen all the way, and to see it through to the end. And I think as part of that, taking into consideration, I sort of was inspired by the elements, fire, the wands, like that's about action, or what originally, what set you down this path, what was your inspiration to head in this direction. And the next card that I had was what feelings how do you really feel about this, to consider it very honestly and vulnerably with yourself. You don't know. That's why I like tarot for these kinds of things, because you can do it yourself, and you can figure out what it is you think about your situation before you go ask advice.
Right.
And so for the swords, sort of that mental in element of the thing, it made me think of boundaries, because if you, whatever it is you're going to make, you're going to want to make room for, or give less room to other people, or situations in your life, so that you can focus on what you need. And then of course there's the practical considerations, like, can I afford this? Do I have the space, the actual physical space in my life for this, or in my calendar? So that's what the Empress made me think of, that period of transition where you made the decision already, but this is a good time to pause and to kind of figure out where you are. And maybe if you are feeling a little oopsie about whatever you decided, you can realign things. You can start to get ready. You can learn to accept that your life is going to change whether or not you're ready. I think with the Empress being shown as a pregnant woman, I think a lot of tarot readers are afraid to talk about the side that, what if it goes wrong, are afraid to tell people, because even if you're not pregnant, what if you are someday, or what if you meet somebody who is someday? You don't want to put that in anybody's mind, because that would make them afraid possibly, and that's opposite of what I ever intend to do when I give a reading, is to make somebody more afraid. But and I think with all the three cards, it's a period of transformation, of like the guy in the wands. He's probably not all, halfway to where he's going, but he's gone far enough that turning around, like he's going to get hungry either way. If he keeps going forward, maybe he'll find, a Burger King along the way, or a salad bar, or if he turns around, he already knows what's that way. What is that way? He knows what he's going to have to walk back through. And the swords, the Three of Swords is a hard card, because it shows those three swords through the heart. And often when you make a decision, you choose one thing at the expense of another. So sometimes somebody's feelings are going to get hurt, or your feelings are going to get hurt. So either way, like, there's no unhurting yourself. There's no unleaving home. You are where you are, and you have to decide, what do I do now? Or if it is an inevitable thing, how do I adjust to what I am going to have to adjust to? Because that's just the way my life is this time around, So that was the reading that I made up, and I will, type it all out and make it available somehow. And yeah.
Well, I mean, I did what I normally do with cards that I'm not all that crazy about. But Angie knows this, Kate. I haven't really discussed, well, maybe I have. But I just have this thing that the go-to creative process for a woman is having a baby. Okay. It just flies all over. What can I say? Because I think women are amazing, and I think they can create so many more things than, and I just don't want to say just kids, but, basically pregnancy is a biological function for survival of the species. Okay, do 50 million things have to come together for it to work? Yes, 50 million things do have to come together for it to work. For any species, whether it's human or dogs or horses or whatever, the fact that we give live birth is pretty miraculous. But I just think that we put, especially now, we put this motherhood on this pedestal, like, nothing else ever gives birth. It's like, horses give birth, and elephants give birth, and giraffes give birth without any help. And so it just bugs me that, the apex of creativity for a woman is having a baby. I disagree with that. I totally disagree with that. And I own that it's my thing. Most people would disagree with me, and that's fine. But I went to my decks, and I pulled 4 different cards, and 3 of which the Empress is not pregnant, one of which it is. And so I guess I'll start with the pulp tarot, which is kind of traditional because it's, it's a woman. And she's in a field and she's reclining. She's got the 12 stars over her head, which kind of represent the 12 months of the year. She's, you know, she's attracting, maybe she's attracting that energy of reproduction or that energy of creativity, but she's not pregnant yet. But she's still very powerful. And I think, again, I use the word attractive. You know, I think that anybody coming across her just sitting there in her rattan chair in a field would just say, let me go over here and see what's going on with this woman, because that looks pretty interesting.
She looks very sensual. Like,
Yeah.
she's very
Yeah.
in touch with her sensuality in more of a sexual way. That's kind
And
of
I
like
think of
what
I
I
think
see.
of looking in this card with the golden and the grain at the bottom here. I think of Demeter, the goddess of grain and harvest, and you know, whose daughter Persephone was taken by Hades to the underworld, and because she ate 6 pomegranate seeds when Demeter went down to rescue her, she, you know, they said, well, she's eaten something down here, so she can't leave. But she, you know, they worked it out that because she ate 6 pomegranate seeds, she would stay in the underworld for 6 months, and then she would be above with her mother for 6 months. And that's how the Greeks in their mythology explained the change of seasons, because when she went to the underworld, Demeter mourned and grieved for the loss of her daughter, and that's why it got cold and the crops died. And you know, in ancient times, that's how that came about. So the second one that I went to was my Law of Attraction tarot, which is so different from everything. And I really like this one because the description says if you want to start to create something, the first thing you need to do is write it down. And I've come across that advice a few times in the last couple of weeks. You know, write it down. It activates something in your brain. It gives you something to go back to. And I love the fact that she has a shield up here and she has her scepter. You know, she's set down all the, you know, trappings of being the Empress to just get out her notebook and write down something that she wants to get done. And, you know, that you can't tell if she's pregnant or not. You don't see any of that. And it's just, you know, because I think the basis of the Empress is creativity, is, you know, deciding to use, she has access to all the resources. She has access to all of nature. She has access to everything, and deciding to use that for your purpose, that you want to create something. And then, of course, my old faithful Zen deck, which is creativity. And, you know, this one shows all the elements coming together. And again, she has the stars on her crown and she's reaching up to the moon. And this talks about, in the book, it talks about everything that you do is creative, whether you're, you know, fixing a meal for your family, whether you're, you know, knitting socks, whether you're, you know, teaching a class, you know, everything that you do is a creative effort. And when you look at it in that regard, and again, this brought me back to that discussion that we had, I think it was in the Golden Shadow, when you pulled, I think, Kate, you pulled the 8 of Pentacles, and it was about the refinement. And I think this, you know, this makes me think of, you know, everything that we do is creative and can be refined to that, you know, to that work of art. You know, a meal can be a work of art. You know, you've had days in the classroom, I know, that you just felt like you clicked and everybody got it and it was great. You know, and I think that anything like that, creative effort like that, you know, deserves to be elevated to that work of art status. And then the last one was from the Tarot Mystical Moments, and it's I guess the most, it's not traditional, but she is carrying a baby, and her dress is a huge flower that encompasses other flowers, and she's outside in nature. So outdoors, nature, creativity, the natural world, the cycles of life, you know, I think all of that is important to that one. So
I like the way they represent that in that particular one. Like,
right.
That her pregnancy is very tiny, and it shows how fragile things are before, like when they're in their beginning stages.
In the
You know,
gestation stages. And I don't know if you can see, but she's holding a crown. So the crown
Mhm.
is like for when the baby is born and it's actually here, or she will then put the crown on the head. So,
so it's like
but
something,
yeah,
it shows that their love and planning went into whatever it is that they're creating. There's
right,
something about that process of, because there is a before and an after in a big
right,
transformation, whether it's a
right.
baby or a new career or an education or
You start a business or whatever.
or something big ends in your life. That
Mhm.
is also a period of transformation where you're called to create while something is falling apart. Like
Right.
you know, so there's a very in-betweeny thing there. Um, that isn't all. I haven't heard it referred to a whole lot of how it's not too late to change the outcome, even if the process isn't going to be any different,
Right.
to change, because you know something is going to happen regardless of your actions. So
Right.
this is the time to start getting used to the idea, not when it's in your face,
Yeah,
not when
exactly.
you're being evicted. The sheriff's office is here putting
Right.
the
I mean,
person
it's
out
like
on bond, or
somebody
you
just
know,
doesn't show up to evict you and nothing has happened before that.
yeah,
You knew it was coming, so you should have been either, making arrangements to pay your rent or finding another place to go.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Or uh, if you are studying for finals and you haven't been studying for finals,
Yeah.
or something is, like, there are decisions that have been made that can't be unmade now, and so this is the time to do that combination of, oh, I better clean up some of this mess that I have made or potentially
Right.
making,
Right.
and getting used to what my new reality is going to be because of something that I participated in.
Yeah. So
And
for me,
that's
Go ahead, Kate.
I was going to say that to me is also like a creative process. So like, creation is basically everything and anything, right? Like we all create, and what you were saying, Angie, just kind of reminded me that when you get to that point where you have to make a decision about what you're going to do, that's like a point of creating something. Like you have to create a way for you to get to where you need to be because you made that commitment. You may have to switch gears, you may have to switch a direction, but you literally have to create some ideas, right? Write them down, like you were saying, Linda, right? A great way to do things in order to get yourself out of this situation that's not the best situation for you to be in.
Mm-hmm.
right. So for me, the Empress, is really about creativity, your own creative power, your own energy, and how you pull together, the assets you need from the world to follow through on your ideas or your impulses, that kind of thing. And, yes, pregnancy is a creative process, but I'm just going to leave that to the side for myself.
I love that. And as you were talking about using the resources on this planet, right? Because the Empress is representative of the earth element, and we
Right.
have these resources here. I had pulled the Light Seers deck, right?
Oh,
And she is pregnant, but she's not pregnant with a baby.
yeah.
She
It's the
has
world.
the world
The
in her
world.
belly,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
love that because it's, you are a creator, like you're creating,
Right.
and you are creating on this earthly plane. And in order to do so, you need to use those resources that are available to you. And it was funny because I was scrolling through the symposium, and I was like, oh, they do little snippet videos on the cards. So I'm like, oh, let me just go see what they have on the Empress. So I went back and I was listening to it and I was like, oh my God, I loved what they did. And they were talking about how pregnancy is like a metaphor for creation, right? Which is basically what we have been saying, and how, they even talked about, like you mentioned, Linda, about how some women are very kind of like turned off with the Empress card, or they don't know how to read it because they just associate it with being pregnant, like you're having a child. Um, and I loved how they kind of turned that around, and they were like, well, you can look at the pregnancy and the fetus inside and the baby as just the creative process, right? Because things have to incubate, right? So you
Right.
have this thing inside of you that needs nurturing and loving and care in order for you to like give birth to it. And I
And
think it
no
was
interference.
Shannon.
And
I'm
no
sorry, say that again.
interference. And
Yeah,
no
no
interference.
interference.
Just
Yeah,
like a creative, like when you're writing a book or painting a picture or, planning your meals for the month, anything, part of it has to just
absolutely.
be just to
Yeah,
kind
and
of
I
let,
think that's the other thing, is that when women, when women get into that creative mode, um, nobody cares. And they're so, say there, there's a woman and she's a painter and she goes to paint, but it's like, Mom, I'm hungry. When's dinner? Mom, where's so and so? Mom, I've got to go to practice. Mom, and so it's not the respect that. So if Dad was a painter, Dad would go into his studio and God forbid anybody interrupt Dad, because that's just not done. Just like, I hate waking people up. Okay. I hate, like, if somebody's asleep and they don't have to get up for work or something and they're just asleep. I hate to wake people up. And part of that comes from, in my house, my father slept a lot, partly because he was mildly depressed, I think, and partly because he got up really early and then he would get tired and take a nap. And on the weekends, when he lay down and take a nap, by God, you better not make any noise. You better not wake him up. Now, my mom stayed up. She was a night owl. She stayed up all night. And sometimes she'd lie down on the couch and fall asleep. Well, nobody thought anything about walking over to her and saying, Mom, I'm hungry. Mom, where's so-and-so? I can't find my shoes. Nobody thought anything twice about waking her up, and I think that's, why a lot of women are not looked at as great creators, because one, people in our society, because of misogyny, is like, they don't think women can do it, because it's like, well, you're just a woman. What can you create? Besides a baby. I mean, and then you're just a breeding animal, and but you can't have an idea, or you can't have a concept that's separate from some man that you are attached to. And when they do, then they're not left alone to pursue it. They got to deal with all this other crap.
I do have to say, though, I do see my voice is like crackly. I do see a change with some of the younger generation, right? Younger than me. So I'm going to go with my my niece and her husband, and they have a 2-year-old son. And I see that change. I see how the father takes on more of that nurturing role with the child, and I see him giving the space and time to the mother that he knows deserves it. Like, he's very, very hands-on, and he has like his own thing that he does. Like, he's in a band and he sings.
Yeah.
And then she has her own thing. And they always manage to make time so both of them get that space that they need for one another without there being any kind of animosity towards one another.
Well, I think
like
that's great.
Yes, and it's happening because, like, even with my son now, like, my son is 26, his girlfriend is 27, And they're the same way. Like, I see how my son is with his girlfriend, and she's pregnant, and like he gives her all the space that she needs. She wants to sleep for hours during the day, sleep for hours during the day. I'm going to get up and I'm going to go do,
Yeah.
what needs to be done. But I do see a change in a lot of the younger, just more of a respect for the value of time, and even if we can say the value of creativity and how that creativity can be different for different people, but at least
Well,
I'm starting to see a
I think,
value for that.
yeah, and I think part of that, it's a slow process, but I think part of that is when you raise your kids to realize that whatever needs to be done in a house doesn't matter who does it. There are things that you do that are called making a house, making a household, whether you're by yourself or whether you're with a roommate or whether you're with a spouse. Food needs to be cooked, dishes need to be washed, laundry needs to be done, things need to be swept up off the floor, things need to be picked up, the dog needs to be walked, all
So
that.
there,
It's just like, that's just what you do when you live in a house. It doesn't matter if you're with other people or by yourself, because even if you're by yourself, you still need to eat, you still need to bathe, you still need to wash your dishes, you still need to have clean clothes. It's the same thing. So even if you live totally by yourself and never got married, never had a boyfriend or a girlfriend, all those things would still need to be done, unless you're just going to live in squalor.
And that's like Empress energy right there, right? The idea that I have all of these things that need to get done. So now I need to prioritize. I need to figure out when I can do this, when I can do this, when I can do this. And even if
mindful
you do have a
transformation.
family, what was that?
Yeah. I said mindful transformation, not just
Yeah.
letting life happen to you. Like either way, once some things are rolling, they're gonna go to their natural conclusion regardless of how you feel about it.
Yeah.
So if you can see it coming, like it sounds like your son and his girlfriend are doing such a great job of
Yeah.
giving each other space to transform from the one thing into the next thing. Like they're
Something else.
going to
Yeah.
go from being boyfriend and girlfriend to being co-parents at the very late,
Right.
and that is so great. That's very Empress energy. I think that
Absolutely.
we are going to do our best to make this uh, outcome be what we want it to be. I think that's so beautiful. I'm so glad
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you
it's
very
just like,
much.
sometimes I don't think, and I'm talking about men maybe in the generation above your son and
Absolutely. I
up
know
upwards
exactly
of
what
that.
yeah, I know
Mhm.
exactly what
I
you
do
mean.
think the younger kids are a little bit more equitable in a lot of ways. But I think, for a certain level, whether it's age or who knows, that they just don't think of women as fully people.
And that's what's
They
happening now
really
in our
don't.
politically, right? In
Yeah.
politics. Like that is kind of like that mentality is being stirred up again.
Right.
And it's
It's like
sort of like
the
that
systems
mentality
in
is being
place.
planted in people's
Right.
heads, about what should the roles for a male and a female be,
Yeah.
and that is yeah, that's very 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 concerning,
So
That's
considering.
that's why I
I
like
listened
the
to
way that
this.
sorry. I
Go
was just
ahead. No,
going to
go
say
ahead.
that's why I like the way that we discuss tarot, because it's about learning to know yourself and to
Yeah.
learn how to self-guide and how to trust yourself instead of relying on anyone to put an idea in your head or to tell you how you're supposed to feel and then to, change their mind in 5 minutes or whatever, like to figure
Yeah. Well,
out
it's the whole thing, like
your
the
life.
woman, the man or the bear,
Mm,
and
yeah.
I listened to this podcast. It's called Mr. Pick Me and the Man Hater. And there's a guy on Instagram. His handle is the Speech Prof, and I guess he's a professor of communications in California. And he talks about he's youngish. I would say youngish. He might be in his early 40s. I don't know. He's been married for about 15 years, and he talks about just kind of male female relationships in the world today, and how how men get so bent out of shape and so like the thing they talked about today was a video, a voicemail that a listener had sent to them that this guy that her mother, I think they'd had one phone conversation. Okay, one phone conversation. And the mother decided she didn't want to take it any further. And so she blocked him, I guess, on social media. Well, he left her a voicemail that was like, oh, what is wrong with you? You're just, oh, you're horrible. And just rant and rant and rant and rant. And it's like, they never even met. They never even met. And it was,
his ego got hurt.
yeah, that's just it. And it's like, we have to do better raising young men to say, if so, you know, because always it was like, well, if she said no, I need to try harder. It's like, now it's like, no, if she said no, you need to stop trying. You need to go somewhere else. You need to find somebody else who wants to be with you. She has told you no.
The decision has been made. How are you going to deal with the consequences?
That's a complete sentence. She doesn't need to explain. She doesn't need to justify. She's given you the information. Go somewhere else. That's it, period.
Absolutely. And I also think it's important for, you know, our listeners and people that are doing tarot that, you know, the Empress is representative of feminine energy, but feminine energy doesn't mean a woman. It doesn't mean being female. Like feminine energy is an energy, and in my mind, it's representative of that nurturing energy, right? That energy where we're showing love and compassion and we're nurturing, whether it be our children that we're nurturing, and that's both male and female.
Yeah, and understanding. It's like, you know, okay, I'm sorry you feel that way. I think we could have, you know, had a good time or whatever, but I get it. See you later. Thanks. Have a great life. You don't have to call him, you don't have to call him a bitch. You don't have to call him a slut. You don't, it's immediately like, oh, so you wanted to go out with me and you must have thought I was somewhat attractive if you wanted to go after me or date me or whatever. But I told you no. And so now I'm a bitch and a slut and a whatever.
Yeah.
You know,
that's
so
more like the very like masculine energy, like the more aggressive, the more like energy, you know, and the female energy is not passive and laid back and I'm going to let everybody walk all over me. But it's more of like taking that approach, Linda, that you were saying. It's like, you know what? I don't want to be aggressive. I don't want to yell and scream. I don't want to curse, you know, so I'm going to end this in a more... Yeah. Exactly. I'm just going to tell you like it is, and I'm going to walk away, and that's it. And
but I've seen so many videos posted about women just walking their dog or just walking in a neighborhood, and then they'll see a guy up there, and they were like, "Oh, should I turn around? You know, should I?" And they're on a public street, you know, and then they turn around, and then the guy is following them, and he's like, "Oh, what kind of dog do you have?" Blah blah blah. And, oh, why are you running away? I just want to talk to you. I just want to be friendly. Why aren't you friendly? And it's just like, leave me alone, you know. And the thing is they follow you long enough, they're going to follow you to where you live, and then they know where you live, and then what?
Absolutely, you know, and it's unfortunate that, you know, women have to be very, very cautious of their interactions with other people because you never know how aggressive. I'll give you, I remember years and years and years ago, I was driving to the gym and I parked my car. Now these are meters, and I parked my car, and there was so between my meter and the person in front of me. So the person in front of me must have had their car way too far up. So he was in between 2 meters. Yeah. And I parked my car right at the meter because I know in New York City, if you're in between meters, you're going to get a ticket.
Yeah, exactly.
So I left my car and there was room. So the guy, this driver, wanted me to, I can't remember if he wanted me to pull my car up or pull my car back so that I would be in between the meters so that he could get a spot. And I wouldn't do it, you know, got out of my car. You know, first he's talking to me really nicely. Oh, you know, could you please? And, and I'm like, listen, I said, I'm so sorry. I said, you know, if I park between the meters, I'm going to get a ticket. And he's like, no, you're not. No, you're not. It's okay. Don't worry. Please, 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 please. And I said, no. And I got out of the car. And I was getting he left, and then he came back around, and it was like night and day. He just turned like that, and he started yelling at me and cursing at me and calling me names. And I was like, I got very, very nervous. I was like, oh my God, what if he gets out of his car and he comes over and he just starts hitting me? Because I've seen it done. I've seen,
Yeah.
people do that. And I was just like, oh my God. So I ran into the gym. And at that time I had a trainer. So I was telling him about it. He's like, do you want me to go outside? And I'm like, no, I don't want you to go outside. You stay here. But I was worried too. Like, oh my God, is he going to do something to my car? Like, is he
Exactly.
going to come back? Am I going to come back and have like flat tires or a broken window or, busted headlights or something like that? But that like really scared the living crap out of me. And it's unfortunate that we have to live in a society where
Yeah.
we have to worry about things like that.
I know.
I live in a
It is
place
very
that is
unfortunate.
not really rural, but it's not a big city. It's I don't know how many people are in Grand Junction, but I don't feel safe going out for a walk simply because of some of the rules we have around here. There's open carry, so it's fine if somebody's walking down the street with a gun. If they're not shooting you with it, they're not committing a crime. You're not allowed to be afraid or call the police. And, people feel I don't even on like the river trails, I'm not comfortable going by myself because there are, people who hang out under the bridge. And
Yeah.
sometimes, or, like high school kids, or, it's just not it really makes me mad. I like to go for walks alone. It's very relaxing unless you're afraid for your life, which,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
And
not
I
so
feel
relaxing.
I feel very grateful because I just don't fit in the category. I mean, and I know that it doesn't really matter what you look like, and it doesn't really matter what age you are. That doesn't matter if somebody is really out to get you or is that kind of a criminal, a serial rapist just does not care.
All right, so let's go back to the Empress. There was a few
Yeah.
more things that I wanted to talk about with the Empress. So like the other thing I associate. So, I associate creation, with, as everybody has been saying, creation, nurturing, right? So anything that you're creating, you have to nurture. And then the other thing that I love, and I've always thought of the Empress as self-care. Like, what kind of self-care rituals or things am I doing for myself? What am I creating to take care of me? We think a lot about nurturing, and people I think automatically think about, nurturing others, but how are we nurturing ourselves? Like, what are we doing to take care of us? What are we creating in our daily lives, that is there for just us, that is going to make us feel good, make us feel positive, make us feel like we love ourselves, right? And the other thing with the Empress is too, it's compassion and love, right? The compassion that we have for others, that's part of nurturing, right? We don't nurture things if you don't love them, if you don't have compassion towards it, right? And then, the compassion towards ourselves. I think for me, it's very easy for me to forget to be compassionate about myself. I am much better at being very hard and cruel and what's the word? Where I always find,
overly disciplined and
like where I find all of my
rigid.
mistakes. I'm
Yeah.
always
Yeah,
like
just
picking out
finding
the things
fault
that
with yourself. Yeah.
always
Overly
finding
critical.
fault with myself. And it's very rare that I look at finding more of the positive things and kind of like celebrating that and nurturing that. And then, I guess along with self-care is this idea of healing, right? Like, to me, feminine energy, like healing is very feminine. Like, to me, that's feminine energy. And I guess it kind of ties into nurturing and healing. In order to heal, you have to create you have to create space for yourself to do that, right? You have to create your new mindset to do that. You have to create and work on developing different feelings and emotions that are going to help you, or finding ways to deal with the emotions that have been have had more of a negative effect, right? So there's like creation everywhere. And I remember when I was younger, people would be like, oh, this person is so creative. And I always, always, always saw creation as, oh, they're doing art, or they're making music, or they're doing an instrument, something like that. And it wasn't until, again, and I attribute so much of what I've learned and what I know from when I got sober. I feel like I was like I must have been a complete deadhead and, I don't know, dummy before I got sober, because I was so enlightened when I became sober, that, oh,
I don't think you were a dummy. I
yeah,
think you underwent a big
you were just
change, a big transformation, Kate, and you were going from a very closed, tight little spot where you
yeah,
only let yourself choose a couple of things, one
yeah.
thing that was not good for you, that was hurting you, that was making your
yeah,
life smaller, and instead you made the decision to knock it off and to figure out how you were going to go forward. And
Yeah,
that's
because
not,
yeah.
my experience with people
some people can't do that.
You're
who
absolutely,
are
and I don't
who are
really mean to say that I believe I was a
Yeah,
dummy.
okay.
But that's my go-to, is to
no,
criticize myself. But it was
here's
more
the thing.
of not wanting myself to see what I should have been, not should have been, but what was best for me to see and make the changes. It was like putting on that cover over my face, the hood over my head, and I don't
Yeah.
want to see anything. I don't want to see it. I don't want to hear it. Just leave me
Yeah.
in my
Well,
la la
the
land,
other
and that's it.
the other thing is, based on my experience with people who have the alcohol dependency, is that when it gets to a certain point, everything in their life revolves around getting alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And so you cannot change their routines. You cannot be spontaneous. You cannot ask them to do something and expect that it will happen, because if it disrupts their schedule of getting alcohol, it's not going to happen.
I don't ever
When,
want you to stop being proud of yourself.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I
they really
appreciate
don't.
that. I appreciate that. Yeah. So then I was thinking too, like, we, part of what we talk about, like on the show when we're doing the cards, is like, how do I see the Empress playing out for me, like right now in my life? And the first thing that came to my mind was this podcast. I'm like, how much more of an Empress energy could you possibly get than
Right?
this, right? Like this, how we started, what we did with this podcast, and what we continue to do, to me is like so representative of like pregnancy being the metaphor for creation. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel we're still in the womb, right? We're still in the womb, and
Yeah.
we're still like working on things. We're getting ourselves ready to
Right.
like give birth and get out there in the world, right? Like we haven't yet put our episodes out there, right? So we're still kind of in there.
Our babies.
Yeah,
Our
we
babies,
haven't
yeah.
had our contractions yet. We're still waiting for the contractions to come along to let us know that it is time now, ladies, to set it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, that was the first thing that came to my mind too when I was thinking about how many, like, what kind of Empress situations I had in my life, and this was like the first thing that popped into my head, because this is something that, like you said, we've begun creating. We're not quite ready to go like public with it yet. We're still putting bells and whistles and counting, figuring out where everything's going to go and what it's going to look like. But it's so, like, it's on its way now. Like, this is what, our fourth card, right? So this is the fourth time we've recorded one of these on a card. And we have the other one where we worked with the Golden Shadow spread from Shannon's podcast, from Shannon at the Tarot
the Tarot
Diagnosis.
Diagnosis podcast. Yes, indeed.
I
And
think we should pull some cards. I think we should
Yeah.
pull some cards on Angie's spread.
you want to do mine?
That would be
Yeah, I think we should.
sure. Listen, Angie,
Okay.
you created a spread, right? You had this Empress energy going on. Let's follow through with it.
Yeah, we could just do the first two. The first card is how to release what's ending.
How to release what's ending. Okay.
And then I put the Empress in the middle. And the next card drawn is how to stay centered in the midst of transformation. during the changes that are going to be happening.
Okay. How to release what's ending, and then how to stay centered in the midst of transformation.
Mhm.
Okay. Oh my.
I got the High Priestess for how to release what's ending, and the Ace of Cups for how to stay centered in the midst of transformation. So I think for me, that's the High Priestess. You know, we talked about last time we met how she can sit and decide and think about things. And just because she's not running up, jumping around every time she has an emotion, yelling and screaming about it, doesn't mean she's not feeling emotional about things. So I
Right.
think just to allow and my emotions, to watch them, to notice them about what's changing, but to not get really like excited about any of it. And then in the Ace of Cups, how to stay centered in the midst of transformation is to remember that in a lot of ways, we can generate our own emotional state. There's things we can do to change it. There's always a choice, a chance to start over. Ace is about a new beginning, or an offer of a new beginning, if you will take the cup. And so I think that's how I'm going to go with that for um, dealing with our weird podcast baby that we're making and all the stuff we're doing to get it ready for the world.
Awesome.
Okay. So for okay, give me the prompt again. I have no memory.
How
How
to
to
release
release.
what's ending.
Okay, so I got basically the Four of Swords or Four of Clouds in the Zen deck, and it's called postponement. And um, it shows a woman who's sort of in a gray and black, gray and white background, looking through a kind of a window with a out onto a very colorful landscape. But in her world, everything is kind of gray. And I know that in typical, in general, the Four of Swords is kind of about resting, resting for a while or pulling back a little bit. But I think in this case, it's like you think maybe you can't get there because of whatever reason. Maybe it's because of finances, or maybe it's because you don't have enough time, or maybe it's because of whatever reason. And so you keep putting things off. I can't do that because of this. I can't do it because of this. Can't, so you're always kind of making excuses, or, not excuses, but things, you put other things in front of the thing that you want, or the thing that you may be working on a little bit here and there, but you're not really working on it 100%. And so I think that in order to get unstuck, you really have to put the creative thing, or the thing that you want to do, you have to give it priority. You have to make it the thing that you want to work on first, not after you've gotten everything else done. But it's like, okay, the housework that can work. People can eat frozen dinners. People can do, it can wait. I'm going to work on this, and I'm going to make that my priority. And so I think that's a good way to get unstuck. Just get up and work on it, instead of saying, oh, I'll work on it when I'm done with all this, because by the time you're done with all that, you're too tired to work on it.
Yeah.
We've all been
Absolutely.
there. So the card I got for how to stay centered through the transition was the Five of Rainbows, which would correspond to the Five of Pentacles, which again is kind of a for me kind of card. But in this case, it's a little kid looking through a gate. And through the gate, there's all this beautiful kind of rainbow, cotton candy looking air, or atmosphere, fog, I guess. And it looks really inviting. And there's a chain around the gate. And he's just looking through the bars like, oh, and it's called the Outsider. But when you look closer, you can see that the lock on the chain is not locked. It's just through the chain, but you could take it out and open it and go through the gate anytime you wanted to. And I think that again, I go back to this book that I just read. The idea of thinking, oh, I'm not good enough. I don't have the money that they do. I'm not on the same social status. Whatever it is that you tell yourself that keeps you on the outside, it doesn't matter. Take the lock off the gate. It's not locked. You're not, push it open, go in, go through the gate, and just keep reminding yourself that you have as much creativity and you have as much, access to the natural world, access, you may not have as much money, but you have a brain. You have as good a brain as anybody else, and you can figure things out just as good as anybody else can. Maybe better, because you have to think outside the box, because you can't just throw a bunch of money at it, or whatever. And just keep that idea in the front of your mind as you go forward, and you'll figure out how to do it.
I love that. That's great. So when I was thinking about the Page of Wands and how to release what's ending, I see the pages as being kind of like a childlike energy, right? A very young, spontaneous energy. And when I think of young and spontaneous, I think of kind of like you're into something now, and then it ends and you go on to something else. And it's sort of like you've kind of forgotten about that one thing and you're going on to something else. And it's kind of like, releasing what's ending is sort of like, try to see it from like a child's point of view. You know what I mean? Like one thing is ending, but I'm really interested in something else. And I have something else to kind of put my energy towards. And might I miss what's ending? Yes. But is it the end of the world? Most likely not, and I can move on to something else. So maybe like holding on to kind of that young, spontaneous energy of I did this, but now I'm on to this, and I think sometimes that can help lessen the effect that leaving something behind, or even lessen the kind of emotions that you experience when you leave something behind.
You are so good. You were so good. I'm
you.
just going to share this page of fire.
Ooh.
Playfulness.
Playful. I was going to say playfulness because that was a card I had picked I did a new moon in Cancer spread, and playfulness was the theme of the spread for me, and it was in my head as I was talking about this.
So this says when the page of fire enters your life, it's a sign that you're ready for the fresh and the new. Something wonderful is just on the horizon, and you have just the right quality of playful innocence and clarity to welcome it with open arms.
Oh, so, I love that. And I love that idea of creation, right? Because it's new energy, it's new ideas, it's like such newness. So maybe even then, like looking at something new that's going to happen with that excitement of, oh my God, yes, I'm going to get this,
and we forget that this whole life experience is just kind of an experiment.
Mm-hmm.
We get so tied up in all the stupidity that people do, but it's just, we're all going to be gone one day. And I think about this, I think about when I go even when I go for a walk, or even when I go out to the lake or something, stand there, like, how many people have stood on this ground? How many people have died here? How many people camped? How many people lived? How many people hunted food, right on this spot where I'm standing? And I'll never know, because, it happened before anybody wrote things down. But, there's not a square foot of earth that people haven't lived on and done something on, and they're no longer here. But, that's okay. They lived their lives and they had their experiences, and, they did their experiment, and then they moved on.
And they made room for something else.
Yeah,
they made room for something else.
Kate, with to release what's ending, how the Page of Wands is kind of like jumps from one thing to another, which is fantastic. But for just a little while we figure out how this is going, this is kind of where a lot of your creative energy is going, instead of from bouncing, between the things. And there is nothing wrong with having more than one hobby. Okay, I should show you my craft board. It's like. We knit, we crochet, we do beads, we do clay, we do wire, I paint, and so
she makes fabulous jewelry.
Many things as you want. But so when you have creativity that sort of fluctuates like that, and you move from one thing to another, occasionally you hit on something where you're like, oh, I'm going to stay here for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
And you will have to sometimes say, oh, I can't do that project right now. It's kind of a distraction, but I can put it on a list and circle back to it when I've got a little more time, you know? So I love
Absolutely.
that as an
Yeah.
attitude of how to let things, like, you're kind of releasing it, but just for now. Like, you can circle
Yeah.
back, you can keep a running list of things to do because sometimes when you are focused on something, it can get a little stale and you need to shake it up and do something different for a while.
Absolutely. And that reminds me of like in the classroom, like we'll do like choice time and have activities, and kids will run to one activity and then they'll leave that activity, but it's really temporary because the next day they're going to come right back to it because it gave them so much joy to do it. They
Yeah.
just weren't interested in the moment, and it's okay to have to not
Mhm.
be interested. Okay, and then the second card for how to stay centered in the midst of transformation. And I can't even believe this card came up because this was my card for when I started my sober journey, was the star.
Ooh.
And the star was like my freaking guiding light. That was like that North Star that I fixated on and I looked at, and just like that is where like I'm going. I am following it. It is there. That is the direction that I'm going in. And I just love that. And I think too, for when you are transforming, keeping that picture of where you want to go and what is like what you think, like, I don't want to say outcome because our outcomes are not always doesn't always happen the way that we want to, but you need to have an end game, right? There needs to be something that you're looking for. And when you sort of like keep your eye on the prize type of thing, I think it makes transformation just a tiny, tiny bit better. Like you're holding on to something, you're looking at something, you're moving towards something that is going to be good for you, that is going to bring you happiness. What's going to happen exactly, you're not sure, but that it's the right thing for you, and then on that journey, because I also see the star as like guidance, like not just guidance of yourself, but the guidance of people around you to kind of help guide you on your way. So yeah, that was that.
I love that
That's
you mentioned
cool.
the North Star because that's something you can navigate by, kind of like no matter where you are in the world. No matter what's
Right.
going on, it is in the same place. And
Yes.
that is such a great card to pull for how to stay centered, I think. Yay.
Yeah, thank you. Yay, this was awesome, Angie. I love your spreads. And readers, please, this will be put in our show notes, and please take some time to pull some cards for this spread. And I know that
We
Angie
need
is
to
going to
see
have
what Angie,
many,
yeah.
many more of them.
More questions in the spread, but I will write it all out and like have a little, so when you're alone, you have 15, 20 minutes to sit down with your deck and think about things. This is a
Yeah.
really good way to help you decide how you're going to adjust if you're in the midst of a transformation that
So let me ask you a question, Angie. When you go to do a spread, do you like refer back to the workshop we did a while back in the symposium about how to do a spread or how to make a spread? Those
no, I didn't.
questions?
For this one, what I did was I pulled a few cards, kind of like what sort of questions would be, to give me hints, what sort of questions would be good to ask
Okay.
yourself if you're in the middle of a transformation. And one of the most striking cards that I pulled out of the three was the death card, and I thought, oh,
Oh,
that's something like a, a perspective that not many people take with transformation. Yes, you're going to have this new thing that you're building and you're working towards, but what do you need to wrap up before you can
right.
authentically, wholeheartedly move on to the next thing and embrace it? So that was kind of the inspiration for this. And then I thought, with the Empress card being kind of the anchor in this, that it's probably a pretty big life, you know, decision that you're going to make.
Yeah.
So to look at it from the perspectives of like the different suits or the different elements, how wands are sort of activity, creativity, and
Right.
cups are emotions and flow, and swords are boundaries, protection, and like also intellectualizing things, making
Right.
serious plans. And then the Pentacles, practical considerations. I'll probably like try to add a little more to that, but it's, you know, something about thinking about the day to day. Am I making room for this in my life? Am I
Right.
making room
Right.
for this big change that's coming in my life? And maybe I could start adjusting, start saving, you know, cut out one of my weekly Starbucks or whatever to save a little
Whatever.
money,
Yeah.
or clean out a closet if I've got a friend coming to visit, or, you know, I need a little bit of space for whatever materials I'm going to use to make this thing that I want to sell, or, you know, so like, how are you going to fit it into your day-to-day life? Not
Right.
just how am I going to be so completely different once this thing lands than I am from today? Like, how do you get there? Sort of.
Right.
And that is, oh my God, that is so important on that process. And I can tell you that sometimes I have real difficulty with that. You know, like I will call myself a procrastinator because I am, and I will wait for the last minute to do things. And then I am like overwhelmed. And I know logically that everything that you just said, Angie, is probably the best thing to do. But for some reason, and you know what I think the reason is because in the end, it gets done. So
Mhm.
maybe I just look at it as, well, I get it done. So you had a little anxiety, but you're still getting it done. But am I really doing it in the most beneficial way for myself? Am I really trying to like not feel like I'm carrying those like 9 of wands on my back when I gets to, you know, the end there? So yeah.
Maybe
goes
you need
back
to
what
maybe you
said
need to
about the
develop a
Empress
spread about that.
and self-care. Yeah, I wrote down a couple of things you said about the Empress and self-care that you could make a pretty awesome spread out of.
So once again, I think we did a marvelous job with this episode. And I hope our listeners enjoyed themselves as much as we did. And we hope that you join us for our next episode, where we will be talking about the Emperor.
The Emperor. Yes,
The
ma'am.
Emperor. All right, my friends, have a wonderful week. And
too.
We'll see you next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday.
Bye.
Bye.